4 episodes ago, we started with a simple question. Why is it that we can know exactly what we should do differently, like really know it, with clarity and detail and years of self understanding, and still not do it? We named that as the insight behavior gap. And then over the next 3 episodes, we went into 3 of the biggest reasons that a gap exists. We talked about the parts of you, the inner system where one part wants change, and yet another part is loyally, proactively working to keep everything exactly as it is. We talked about the body, the nervous system that decides what's safe before your thinking brain has time to weigh in, and that carries old learning in places language alone cannot reach. And then last week, we talked about memory reconsolidation, the neuroscience of how, when 3 specific conditions line up, the old learning can actually be rewritten. Today, I want to show you something. I want to show you how all those 4 pieces are not 4 separate things. They're just 4 different angles on the same underlying picture. And when you see them together, you get something practically useful, a framework for thinking about change that cuts through a lot of the noise about which therapy to pick, which book to read, which approach is the real one. And this is what I've been calling the MetaTherapy Framework. And it's what I'll be presenting at the APA convention this year. But before it goes to a research audience, I wanted to walk through it with you first. So the 4 pillars, let me walk you through each one briefly, roughly 90 seconds each. This isn't the whole thing. Each of these has already had its full episode, but you need them all sitting in front of you before we can put them together. Pillar 1 is relational safety. The largest source of outcome variance in decades of psychotherapy research is not any particular technique. It's the therapeutic relationship. Meta-analytic estimates the therapeutic alliance accounts for roughly 30% of outcome variance across bona fide therapists and therapies. Specific technique, the actual named protocol, accounts for only about 1%. This isn't a soft finding. Alliance is what makes it safe enough for anything else in therapy to actually work. Without safety, the parts stay defended. The body stays braced. The old memory stays locked. The relationship is the container. Everything else lives inside it. Pillar 2, the internal multiplicity. You are not one person trying to change. You are a system of parts, each with its own history and job. Some parts want the change. Some parts, quite loyally, don't. The parts we tend to fight most, the inner critic, the procrastinator, the avoidant one, are usually the ones doing the hardest protective work. They developed early. They took on jobs that kept you safe. And they aren't going to update just because your rational mind has read the right book. The 2026 parts randomized control trial, the first large RCT of a group-based internal family systems protocol for PTSD conducted at Harvard-affiliated medical center, is the strongest recent empirical support for parts-based clinical work. The clinical move here is what IFS calls unblending. The shift from I am anxious to a part of me is anxious. And that tiny linguistic change is the beginning of an actual relationship with the parts of you that have been running things. Pillar 3, somatic awareness. A lot of what keeps us stuck isn't in language. It's encoded below the level of conscious verbal processing, in the amygdala, in the brainstem, in the insula, in the body itself. Which means that talking about something, no matter how thoughtfully, doesn't always reach the layer where the pattern actually lives. The body has to come back online first. And the access point, the strongest evidence-based one, is interoception, the perception of internal signals. Interoception is trainable, and the neuroscience is robust. A 2024 study in translational psychiatry showed that structured interoceptive training measurably altered functional connectivity between the anterior insula and other key regulatory brain regions. This is not soft science. This is a somatic pillar's empirical spine. The practical move is simple. Check in with your body regularly, not to fix it, not to change what's there, just to notice. That noticing is the skill. That skill is the doorway. A very brief callback to episode 3's honest caveat. Polyvagal theory, the framework most clinicians have been taught for autonomic regulation, is genuinely useful clinically, and its specific neurophysiology is under active scientific challenge as of this year. The clinical map still helps. The mechanism is being worked out. Don't dwell on it here. Just name it and move on. Pillar 4 is the experiential transformation. And last week, the mechanism, the neuroscience of how lasting change actually happens at the level of the brain. It's called memory reconsolidation, and it says something remarkable. When an emotional memory is reactivated, it briefly becomes editable. In that window, if a genuinely mismatching new experience shows up and repeats, the old learning gets rewritten, not covered up, not managed around, actually rewritten. The neuroscience originated with Nadersheff and Ledoux, a rat amygdala protein synthesis, and has been extended to humans in over 20 behavioral studies since Schiller. Bruce Ecker's 2024 papers in the Journal of Psychotherapy Integration and the Journal of Psychiatry and Psychiatric Disorders are the current definitive clinical synthesis. 3 requirements: reactivation, mismatch, repetition. That's the formula for the kind of change that lasts. Now, here's the piece I want most to land with you today. What I've been describing isn't one clinician's theory, and it isn't a marketing pitch for a new brand of therapy. It's simply a synthesis. And the reason I trusted it enough to present it at APA this year is that 4 totally independent lines of research, done by different people over decades, all point to the same underlying conclusion. Let me walk you through it briefly. Line 1, common factors. For several years, researchers have been comparing therapies head to head. And the consistent finding, which sometimes drives specific modality advocates a little crazy, is that when you compare bona fide therapies to each other, the outcomes are remarkably similar. So what accounts for that? The relationship, the alliance, the therapist's warmth and skill, the client's readiness, things that are common across all good therapy, not specific to any one brand. Line 2, the therapist effects. Now, a closely related literature. Multiple large studies asking a different but related question. How much does it matter which therapist you see, independent of which modality they practice? Answer: 3 to 15% of outcome variance is attributable to which therapist you see. The largest real-world study, Mahon and colleagues in 2023, analyzed 900 therapists and 150,000 clients. Therapist effects, about 5% of outcome variance. Modality, about 1%. Translation, who you work with matters roughly 5 times more than which brand of therapy they practice. That's a stunning finding, and it should be affecting how everyone in the field thinks. It's certainly practically useful for anyone looking for a therapist. Line 3, integration outcomes. Third line, now we're just looking at common factors or therapy effects. We're asking directly what happens when clinicians integrate approaches rather than staying strictly within a single modality. There's a landmark meta-analysis by Swift and Greenberg from 2012, 587 studies on psychotherapy dropout. Their finding? Integrative approaches showed the lowest dropout rates across 11 of 12 disorders they examined. Client retention is one of the strongest real-world signals we have that a treatment is actually fitting the person. Integrative approaches win it decisively. Line 4, mechanism unification. The fourth line, and this is the one we've spent all of the last week on, Bruce Ecker's 2024 argument that memory reconsolidation offers the first empirically grounded mechanism of therapeutic action that unifies many disparate modalities. AEDP, coherence therapy, EFT, EMDR, IFS, ISTDP, and somatic experiencing, psychedelic assisted therapy, and even arts therapies. Ecker's argument is that when they work, they're all mobilizing the same underlying mechanism. The brand varies, but the mechanism does not. So let's put those four together. 4 separate research programs, 4 different generations of researchers, 4 different methodologies. 1, common factors. The relationship matters most. 2, therapist effects. The person matters more than the brand. 3, integration outcomes. Clients stay in flexible integrative treatment. And 4, mechanism unification. Beneath the different brands, one underlying process. They all point to the same conclusion. Therapeutic change is driven by processes that cut across modalities, not by any single approach's superiority. That's the empirical case for an integrative framework. It's not one person's opinion. It's what the field's own research keeps finding. So here's the framework altogether. 4 pillars, 1 central mechanism, and a specific relationship between them that turns this from a list into a working framework. 1, relational safety. The container makes it safe enough for the reactivation to happen without re-traumatization. 2, internal multiplicity. The map locates which part is holding the old learning and needs to come to the room. 3, somatic awareness. The access. The body is often the fastest way to reactivate the old learning and the fastest way to find the mismatch. 4, experiential transformation. The mechanism where reactivation, mismatch, and repetition converge and the old thing gets rewritten. Look at the shape of that. Pillars 1, 2, and 3 aren't separate techniques. They're different pathways into Pillar 4, different ways of creating the conditions for actual updates to happen. The relationship creates the safety that allows reactivation without being re-traumatized. Working with parts brings the old learning into the room in a way that's precise, not overwhelming. The body gives you the felt sense access and the felt sense mismatch that language alone can't produce. And all of it converges in the moment the mechanism fires. The reason this framework holds together is not because I put it together cleverly. It holds together because the underlying mechanism is real. Each pillar is a different door into the same room. And when you know that, you stop worrying about which door you look for, whether any door is actually being opened. Okay, so now let's put this to work. If you're currently in therapy or thinking about starting, I want to give you a self-audit you can run. 4 questions, 1 for each pillar. Ask them honestly. There's no right answer. This is diagnostic, not prescriptive. Question 1. Do I feel safe with this person? Not just intellectually safe, but actually safe. Can you tell them things you haven't told anyone? Can you cry in front of them? Can you disagree with them without something in you bracing for consequences? If yes, pillar 1 is in place. If no, it's not a failing of yours or of theirs. That might just be a signal about the fit. The relationship is the largest single lever in the room. If it isn't working, nothing downstream can quite work either. Question 2. Do we work with the parts of me that are stuck, or just talk about them? There's a real difference between analyzing a pattern from a distance and actually meeting the part of you that's running it. If your sessions are mostly about explaining your patterns to your therapist, that's insight building, which has value, but it's not the same as working with the inner system. The sign of parts work happening, you start to feel more compassion for the parts of you used to fight. You notice more space between you and your reactions. You can talk about the loyal, protective quality of the stuck patterns without feeling like you're excusing them. Question 3. Does my body get to be in the room? Not as a topic, but as a participant. Does your therapist ever ask what you're noticing in your body? Do you ever pause because something shifted somatically? Or is everything happening from the neck up? You don't need a somatic specialist to have this. You just need it to be present sometimes. If it's completely absent, if you never leave your head in sessions, that's a whole layer that isn't being touched. Question 4. Have things actually changed in ways that last? And this is the big one. Not do you understand yourself better? You probably do. But do things, the actual patterns you come to work on, hit differently now? Does the trigger that used to grab you sometimes not grab you? Do you notice yourself doing new things without having to force them? If yes, the mechanism is firing. Reconsolidation is happening. Pillar 4 is real for you. If no, and it's been a long time, that's worth sitting with. It doesn't mean the therapy is bad. It might mean you're getting other things from it: support, insight, a place to think. But if lasting change is what you came for and it's not happening, something isn't lining up. And the framework gives you a way to ask what. These aren't questions to weaponize against your therapist. They're questions to think alongside them. A good therapist will welcome them. That's actually a 5th signal, how the therapist responds when you bring up questions like these. If they get defensive, that's information. If they get curious, that's also information. Before we close, I want to be really clear about what this framework is and isn't. What the framework is: a synthesis frame, a way of organizing what the field's most durable findings collectively point toward, a practical tool, something you can use to evaluate therapy, find a therapist, or think about your own path. Empirically grounded pillar by pillar. Each of the 4 has real research behind it, some stronger than others. What the framework is not: a new proprietary modality. MetaTherapy isn't competing with IFS or EMDR or SE or CBT. It's a way of seeing what they share. Superior to every established treatment, for some conditions, single modality treatments with strong RCT support, prolonged exposure for PTSD, CBT for OCD, and others are still the right first move. The framework helps explain why they work, not replace them. An RCT tested integrative protocol. I'll be honest about this at APA. No specific integrative combination MetaTherapy protocol has been formally trialed. The framework organizes existing evidence. It doesn't yet stand as its own manualized treatment. Being clear about a framework doesn't claim its credibility. So here's what I want to leave you with. 5 weeks ago, we started with the frustration of knowing what you want to change and not being able to change it. And we've spent 5 Sundays together working out why and what actually works. What I hope you're taking with you is not a technique. It's not a script. It's not a sense that you should now be able to run reconsolidation on yourself or unblend from every part of you on demand. What I hope you're taking with you is a frame, a way of thinking about your own patterns and your own path that's a little more accurate than the frames most of us were handed. Change is not a mystery. It's not lucky. It's not something a chosen few get. It's a shape. It happens in a relationship. It happens with your parts, not against them. It happens through your body, not around it. And when the conditions are right, the old thing actually rewrites. That's it. That's the whole thing. And here's the last thing I want to say. All of this, everything we've talked about, it starts with paying attention to your parts, to your body, to your relationships, to what your patterns are protecting. That paying attention is the beginning of everything. It's a small thing, and yet it is also the whole thing. What comes next? New topics, new frameworks, new conversations. If you want to go deeper on any of the 4 pillars, each has its own long-form written companion piece on our website with full references. And I'll be presenting this whole framework formally at APA this year. If you're in the field or attending the convention, come find the poster. If this series has been useful to you, the best thing you can do is share the episode with one person you know who's been circling a pattern they can't quite change. That's how this reaches the people who most need it. And the question I'd love for you to sit with, not just this week, but going forward, is this: which pillar is the one I most need right now? Not which is most interesting, not which sounds coolest. Which one, if you are being really honest with yourself, is the one that would move things most in your life right now? Whatever comes up, that's your next step. Not this year's whole plan, just the next one. My name is Dominic, and this has been MetaTherapy. Until next time.